Climate change requires each country to reduce its heat-trapping emissions like carbon dioxide. One method economists have recommended assign each country allowable permits that define what they can emit. These permits will decrease over time. If they emit more, then they must buy more permits. So, you can imagine countries may want more permits because it reduces the need for them to buy more permits. They may even be tempted to give more permits to their own country than another country. To solve this bias, Huang and colleagues propose that humanizing people from other countries will decrease in-group favoritism. To understand humanization, we must first understand what humanness is. Humanness is the unique essence of humans that makes them different from animals and other non-entities like robots. Expressing secondary emotions is one of these unique qualities attributed to humans. Secondary emotions include emotions like admiration, sympathy, and love. These contrast with primary emotions, such as happiness and sadness. So, people who express secondary emotions may be perceived as more human than people who express primary emotions. When humanized, people may include them in what is known as the scope of justice. Scope of justice is illustrated by these concentric circles. Caring equally about all the groups in the circles is the broadest scope of justice. Caring more about those who in the smaller circles than those in the larger circles represents a narrower scope of justice. Humanization of an outgroup may lead to treating the group more like in-groups because the humanization may bring the group inside one scope of justice. Given what is known about humanization and scope of justice, Huang and colleagues hypothesized that if people humanized an outgroup, they would broaden their scope of justice, and this broader scope of justice would lead more equal distribution of emission permits between in-groups and out-groups. In their study, 220 Chinese participants were asked to act like they were at an international summit, and their job was to decide how to divide 60 available emission permits between China and Russia. To make it more realistic, they were given actual money the more permits they gave to China. Before this task, half were randomly assigned a humanization condition. These people read an article where Russians express secondary emotions more easily than primary emotions. The other half were randomly assigned to a dehumanization condition. They read an article where Russians express primary emotions more easily than secondary emotions. Then they completed a survey that included a measure of scope of justice toward Russians. Last, they acted like they were in a summit. They decided how many emission permits to give the Chinese and Russians. Here are the results for the breadth of scope of justice. In the humanized condition, participants had a broader scope of justice more than in the dehumanized condition. Here are the results for the allocation of emissions. An equal distribution would be 30 emission both countries. When Russians were humanized, participants allocated carbon emission permits to Russia more fairly than when Russians were not humanized. Looking across the measures, humanization increased scope of justice toward Russians, which then increased more equal allocations between Russia and China. Thus, a reason humanization increased for fair allocations was because it influenced scope of justice. Humanizing outgroups helps people believe that others should be treated more fairly, thus promoting justice in carbon allocation. The way we view others directly affects whether we treat them fairly and equitably.